This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Hello, and welcome back to the GSMC Sports Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Alex Masfer. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode and tuning in to all of the episodes. Before I start talking anything sports, I want to remind you guys to all subscribe to the podcast on whatever app you are listening to this on. We would really appreciate it. Also, make sure to leave us a 5-star review in the comments as well. We also appreciate that. And make sure to follow us on all social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We love to interact with you guys on there as well. Whatever you have social media-wise, we have as well. We would love to interact with you on those platforms. I hope wherever and however you may be listening, you and your family are happy and healthy during these times. Now, we have a fantastic show for you guys today. A little bit later, I'm going to be giving you the NFL MVP odds came out. I want to talk about two players who are pretty high on the list. One who I believe deserves to be there. Another I do not believe deserves to be there. I'm also going to be talking about Bradley Beal. On Twitter yesterday, he interacted with the Miami Heat player, and a lot of people are saying that Bradley Beal could want out eventually. I'm going to give you guys a list of teams where I believe Bradley Beal could be moved in the offseason if him and the Wizards do, part ways. Not just the Miami Heat, but a bunch of other teams as well. Some more likely landing spots than the Heat. I'm going to be giving you guys that later in the episode. And also make sure to stick around to the end of the episode, where I'm going to be giving you guys my top 10 NFL wide receivers. One of the most hard lists I think I've actually had to make. Harder than the quarterback one, harder than the coach one. Wide receivers is a really tough position to gauge who's better than who. So I'll be giving you guys that list at the very end of the episode. But we start with what happened yesterday to the Los Angeles Lakers. And that's that Rajon Rondo actually has a broken bone in his hand, and he's going to be out 6 to 8 weeks. This is a problem for the Lakers. They are getting to a point now where I am not confident anymore that the Los Angeles Lakers are a championship team. Me, really, has been all over the Lakers. I've said that the stars are aligning for them. This is their championship year. LeBron James is still the best player in the world, and I still believe that LeBron is the best player in the world. Only LeBron James can overcome so much when the competition in front of him is so hard. We are getting to a point now where the Los Angeles Lakers squad is really paper to paper, matchup to matchup, not good enough, not maybe even close to the roster of those of the Los Angeles Clippers, Milwaukee Bucks, even maybe Boston Celtics now, and I'll get into all three of those teams in a minute. But now the Los Angeles Lakers and LeBron James have lost two veteran defensive guards. Arguably, their two best perimeter defenders are Rajon Rondo at the point guard position, who came off the bench, and Avery Bradley, who was a starter. Avery Bradley obviously chose not to participate in the Orlando Bowl for family reasons and with what's going on, in the world. He decided to not play. So now, LeBron James, since the bubble, going into the bubble, when everybody's rested, almost every team is healthy. The Clippers are healthy, about 9 or 10 players deep. LeBron James and the Lakers have lost their two best defensive guards, two of their best veterans, and they're replacing them with guys like Dion Waiters, Quentin Cook, and J.R. Smith. That is terrible, and that is a really bad sign for the Los Angeles Lakers, because I am a firm believer that LeBron James can overcome. LeBron James can win you 2 games in a series by himself. He can win you 2 games in a series. I think Anthony Davis is a top 10 player in the league, and I kept saying this before Avery Bradley announced he wasn't going to play, and obviously before this Rondo injury, that I really believe that the Lakers were going to win in 7 against the Clippers in the Western Conference Finals. And I think we can all agree that that's probably going to be the Western Conference Finals, bearing any more injuries to the Lakers or even the Clippers. I really do believe the Lakers and Clippers are the 2 best teams in the league. But now the fact that, LeBron has lost those two high IQ, leadered defensive guards in a league that is very guard driven right now in the playoffs. So let's even look at some other matchups. So let's say, maybe not in the first round, maybe in the second round, the Rockets play the Lakers, right? The Rockets are a ball-dominant, guard-oriented offensive system led by Mike D'Antoni, James Harden, Russell Westbrook. They go small ball. All they do all the time is they go small ball. It's known. Some people agree with it, some people don't. James Harden is a shooting guard, also takes up the ball. They're a ball-oriented, dominant team. They don't have a true center. Now, take that matchup against the Los Angeles Lakers. That is a bad matchup for the Lakers now because the Rockets, who have two top 10 guards in the league, maybe even top 5, you could argue Russell Westbrook is a top 5 guard in the league, maybe two top 5 guards in the league are going to be guarded by who? Quentin Cook, Dion Waiters, J.R. Smith. Do you trust any of those guys to even put some level of competition in front of the uber-athletic Russell Westbrook or James Harden, who averages almost 40 points a game? This is a bad sign for the Lakers. And sure, Anthony Davis could maybe chop it up on the other end, really bully, Robert Covington and some of the smaller people they have on the other end of the floor. That's great and all, but are you going to stop James Harden and Russell Westbrook, who could combine for what, 65 points? Maybe? If James Harden drops 40, Russell drops 35, because you don't have an actual really good defensive guard guarding them. And then all of a sudden, I don't know if LeBron can overcome that. I seriously don't. And then you go on to another matchup, which is the Los Angeles Lakers. Or excuse me, the Lakers versus the Clippers, which is what I have been saying is Lakers in 7, Lakers in 7, Lakers in 7. I'm changing that now. I don't believe the Los Angeles Lakers are a championship team anymore, and I don't think they're going to win the NBA championship this year. Barring something crazy, like an injury to the Clippers, or the Clippers absolutely fall apart. Because again, I love LeBron James, and he posted something on his Instagram of like sort of a superhero edit of him being in like a cryogenic chamber, saying like, watch out. When the league comes back, when we start playing games, I'm going to destroy everything in my path. And that's great, LeBron. I really do. I think LeBron James is obviously going to put up numbers in the playoffs. He's obviously going to do it. He's obviously going to average 27 plus, maybe even close to triple-double numbers. But again, basketball is a team game, and LeBron knows this more than anybody, how much help you need to win series. You know that LeBron got to the championship with that terrible Cavalier team twice. His first stint with the Cavs when he brought them and lost to the San Antonio Spurs, and more recently, I think in 2016, when he brought, a bunch of nobodies and Kevin Love to the NBA Finals against the Golden State Warriors and got swept. LeBron James knows more than anybody you need help in this league, and one of the biggest things that people like Skip Bayless and others criticize about LeBron is how much help he needs. And this post on Instagram is, kind of referencing that he would need that help when he does. The Clippers are the deepest team in the league, and they are the biggest competition in my opinion, and the biggest thing and the biggest obstacle standing in the way of the Los Angeles Lakers from winning a championship and truly getting back on top. Because that's what this is the Lakers' goal, right? The Lakers' goal when signing LeBron James was to bring them back to relevancy, bring them back to the top of the sports world, bring them back to one of the biggest and best brands in the NBA. And while they still maintain good business and everything like that, the Lakers were not really taken seriously as a basketball team for the past 4 or 5 seasons before LeBron got there last year. And now they're kind of finally back. The problem is that LeBron has been masquerading a not great team. LeBron and Anthony Davis, I should say, have been masquerading a not great team this entire season. Sure, they're number one in the rest record-wise, but you have to take into account that the Los Angeles Clippers have 2 guys that load manage and sit out 25% of the games, Kawhi Leonard, Paul George. And the Los Angeles Lakers, when you look at it on paper, are not as deep at all. Their bench is considerably worse than the Lakers, than the Celtics, than the Milwaukee Bucks, who they might face in the NBA Finals. In comparison to those teams, the Lakers bench looks like nothing. And now when you've taken out a starter, Avery Bradley, and potentially 2 starters, Bradley and Rondo, 2 bench guys have to step up. Dion Waiters, who was recently signed by the Los Angeles Lakers before the break, the hiatus happened, everything with the coronavirus. Dion Waiters was signed. I don't even think he saw a minute for the Lakers yet. I don't think he actually had played a single minute. I'm not exactly positive on that, but I don't think he did. Are you expecting Dion Waiters now, after his entire fiasco at the beginning of the year with those quote-unquote gummy bears on the plane and everything like that, to be a serious rotational piece for a championship team? I don't think anybody would feel confident in that. I don't think LeBron James himself feels confident in that. How about Quentin Cook, who hasn't done anything all year either? You're counting on him to be your starting point guard during this pandemic. I mean, LeBron will play point guard, but starting two guard maybe during this pandemic. The best defender that the Los Angeles Lakers have now, besides LeBron and AD, is Danny Green. And I love Danny Green, but he's old. He's up there. He doesn't have the same lateral quickness that he used to have. Do you trust Danny Green to cover a guy like Russell Westbrook in a 7-game series? To cover a guy like James Harden in a 7-game series? Do you trust him to guard a guy like, Kemba Walker in a 7-game series? Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Chris Middleton, Eric Bledsoe. All of those to me scream mismatch for the Lakers, which is why I'm kind of changing my tune here, and the Lakers are not going to win a championship this season. They just can't match up anymore, man. And it's tough because I'm a huge fan of LeBron James. I'm one of LeBron's biggest supporters. I am one of those people that haven't ruled out him potentially becoming the greatest player of all time. I've talked about on this show some things to recap quickly of what I think LeBron needs to be the greatest player of all time. He's got to break Kareem's record of NBA scoring champ. I think he's going to do that. And if he can win 1 or 2 more titles with the Lakers, then you can have a real conversation if he's the greatest player of all time. And I might even lean that way. So again, I am a big LeBron James supporter. I am not a LeBron James hater. Again, I've been saying on this show all along that I really do believe it was the Lakers' year to get back to relevancy, get back all the way to the top, and now I don't think so. I think they're a year away. Now, I don't think if the Lakers don't win a championship this year, some people have suggested that, Michael Jordan's documentary was called The Last Dance, that this is LeBron's last chance. I don't believe that. I think LeBron James, no matter what year he's in the league, will always be a championship contender. But let's be real, him and Anthony Davis have been really carrying a lackluster roster. There are no other third superstar in comparison to some of the other teams. And again, it doesn't even have to be a superstar, actually. Because when you look at the Clippers, it's Kawhi and Paul George, right? The Lakers have 2 guys that match up talent-wise. They're not like from a positional guarding standpoint, but they have 2 stars. They have LeBron and Anthony Davis. Who's the third best player in the Clippers? Oh, Lou Williams. Is there a guy in the Lakers right now that's the Lou Williams caliber? No. How about Montrezl Harrell? No. How about some other guys on the team? No. Is there a defender like Patrick Beverley on the team? No. So this is the problem with the Los Angeles Clippers versus the Los Angeles Lakers. It's just a complete mismatch all over the floor. So when you take Patrick Beverley, right? So the LeBron, so when he is playing in this playoff series, let's say against the Los Angeles Clippers in the Western Conference Finals, is going to need more support because LeBron's not going to drop 80 points. LeBron will get his. I mean, Kawhi will defend him and he'll defend him well, but I trust LeBron enough to break through and get what? Let's say LeBron has a 30-point triple-double, best case scenario. Let's say Anthony Davis has a, 25-point insane game, 25 points, 12 rebound game, even though he's getting guarded by Montrezl Harrell the entire time. Who else is scoring for the Lakers right now? You trust Kyle Kuzma, who's going to be guarded by Mo Harkless, or maybe even Paul George? No. Do you trust Quinn Cook, who's going to be guarded? Do Quinn Cook, Dion Waiters, or J.R. Smith, who's going to be guarded by Patrick Beverley, maybe the best perimeter guard defender in the entire league? Besides maybe Marcus Smart, I would put ahead of him. Do you trust those guys? Those guys can barely get buckets when they're being guarded by subpar players. Again, Dion Waiters and J.R. Smith were out of the league for a long time. And I don't understand why some people are saying that these, people are just like, oh, well, next man up, Dion Waiters, J.R. Smith, they're just going to have to step up and, help LeBron out, and they will, and people are confident in that. But when you really think about it, again, J.R. Smith, the entire season he was gone. Nobody signed J.R. Smith. LeBron James didn't sign J.R. Smith, who's his good friend, clutch advocate, everything like that. LeBron loves J.R. Smith. Everyone's like, oh my God, look at their friendship. Look at their connection. They've won championships together. Then why didn't LeBron James bring him in the entire season? Because if LeBron went up to hire people, went up to Rob Pelinka and said, sign J.R. Smith, they would have done it within 5 minutes. It wasn't until they lost Avery Bradley, lost a key part of the rotation, that they bring on a J.R. Smith. Again, Dion Waiters didn't play at all the first half of the season due to the fiasco that he had with the Heat, with the gummy bears and the airplane and everything going on with that. And then when he was released, eventually let go by the Heat, he sat there for 2 weeks, 2+ weeks on the open market. Nobody signed him. The Clippers didn't want him. Celtics didn't want him. The Sixers, Dion Waiters from Philadelphia, and they need shooting. Even the Sixers were like, get away from that. The Lakers bring him in, and he's supposed to be LeBron James' third contributor, his third wheel, the third guy that's going to offer scoring in this playoff run for the Los Angeles Lakers. Again, the Lakers now, LeBron James has always done this. He has made things appear better than they are. If LeBron James was not on this team, where would they be? Nowhere near where they are now. And I love Anthony Davis. But he won 1 playoff series as a member of the New Orleans Pelicans, And that's maybe what they would get. They wouldn't even get that with this Laker roster. Again, they lost their two best defensive guards, maybe Danny Green you can throw in there too, Rajon Rondo, Avery Bradley. They're replacing them with J.R. Smith and Dion Waiters, who were not playing the entire season. They have a combined, I think, 13 games played among them. Dion played 13 games at the beginning of the season. J.R. Smith was just signed now. What is J.R. Smith going to look like? J.R. Smith of New York Knicks back in 2010, 2011? Absolutely not. He's not even going to look like the J.R. Smith that won a championship with the Cavs when they came back 3-1. Dion Waiters isn't going to look like the 30-11 Dion Waiters Miami Heat when he hit that shot over Golden State. He's not going to look like that either. These are two guys who should be sitting on the end of your bench getting 10 minutes max. Now you're asking them to play, 25 plus minutes alongside LeBron James to help him win a championship and be the third leading scorer on the team maybe? There's just no way that's going to happen. Again, I don't believe that the Lakers are a championship team anymore, and I think LeBron is starting to realize that. My money is now on the Los Angeles Clippers to come out of the West. I don't know how a series would go. I haven't really thought about it between, Clippers and Celtics, or, Clippers and Bucks. I'll get into that maybe in a different episode. But as of right now, unless something major happens with the Los Angeles Lakers, I do not believe they're a championship team anymore. I think they cap out of Western Conference Finals. I don't think they can beat the Clippers in a 7-game series. The matchup just isn't right for them on paper. We're going to take a quick break, and right after the other side, I'm going to be giving you guys some MVP odds came out on the NFL, and there are two young quarterbacks that are really high up on that list. One player I think deserves to be there and could pop and be an MVP candidate, and the other is not deserving of there, and I think he's holding his team back, and I will get into that right after this break.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, and we are back here at the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm Alex Masfer. Thank you so much for continuing to listening to this episode. I just got finished talking about why I think LeBron James and Los Angeles Lakers are no longer a championship team anymore due to the injuries of Avery Bradley and Rajon Rondo. And I want to switch gears here to the NFL. And yesterday, OddsShark, who is one of the most popular, I think, sports gambling sites and odds makers out there, I think they're from Las Vegas as well, put out their MVP odds for who they believe has the highest chance of winning the NFL Most Valuable Player. Of course, the list is just touted with quarterbacks everywhere, as it usually does. A quarterback wins an MVP every year for the NFL. And let's get right into it. So, obviously, there's the number one up there. It goes Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, and tied for third is a young quarterback by the name of Kyler Murray, who, as a lot of people have touted, is, the next jump guy. A lot of players going into after year one, going to year two, a lot of quarterbacks we've seen recently have made an insane jump to potential MVP level. And it's happened, I think, 3 out of the last 4 years. If you remember Carson Wentz, the year the Philadelphia Eagles won the Super Bowl, I think that was his second or third year in the league. He made a huge jump to MVP caliber play and would have won MVP if he didn't get hurt at the end of the season. Patrick Mahomes, obviously, from year 1 to year 2, became an MVP player and won MVP that year. And also last year, Lamar Jackson went from year 1 to year 2 and became an MVP like he was this most recent season. Now, I'm not saying that Kyler Murray is definitely going to win MVP or anything like that, but I've touted that that there's 2 guys that I think, and I talked about this in my last episode, that could make the jump, Kyler Murray and Drew Lock. And I'll get to Kyler Murray in a second. But there's another quarterback on this MVP list that is way too high for me, and I'm going to argue that he actually brings his team down, and he should not be as high as he is. That quarterback is Buffalo Bill quarterback Josh Allen. Josh Allen is technically fourth in MVP odds when you just look at the numbers, but he's actually the seventh player listed because Kyler Murray is tied with a bunch of people, including Russell Wilson, who I believe should be higher. But Josh Allen is technically the fourth in MVP odds, and he is the seventh player listed. Now, in my opinion, that is way too high for Josh Allen. I don't think Josh Allen is a serious MVP candidate like some people have pegged him out to be. Josh Allen is a nice player. He is maybe considered a good player. I would consider him an average NFL quarterback. And no, I don't believe he's going to make a significant jump because his main problem, Josh Allen this is, in the National Football League is his accuracy. And the thing with accuracy in the National Football League now is that this league has gone away from Josh Allen. The quarterbacks that play and are like Josh Allen and more towards the quarterbacks that are like, super accurate Joe Burrow, Tua Tagovailoa, Tom Brady, Drew Brees, guys like that. So the NFL, for a quick history lesson, used to be when you were looking for an NFL quarterback, you would get the biggest and strongest guy you could find, and if he was mobile, that would be great as well. And the NFL is not like that anymore. Those guys were like Jamarcus Russell. Those guys were like Ryan Leaf. Those guys were like, who else? Jay Cutler. Those guys were like Sam Bradford. The biggest and strongest guys you could find who could whip the ball downfield, had a huge arm strength, everything like that. Now, does Josh Allen have arm strength? Yes, he does. But in my opinion, there is a difference between arm strength and arm talent. Now, arm talent is something that you need to have to be an elite NFL quarterback, and there's a difference. So, arm strength is just basically, who can throw the ball farther, obviously. Justin Herbert is another quarterback coming out of the draft who had huge arm strength. Jay Cutler had huge arm strength. Arm talent is different. Arm talent is, can you throw off different platforms? Can you be accurate off different platforms, different arm angles? Can you throw guys open, which in my opinion is the biggest and most important stat in grading elite NFL quarterbacks. So, does Patrick Mahomes, for example, have arm strength? Yes, but he also has arm talent, the best arm talent in the league, which is throwing from ridiculous arm angles, ridiculous platforms, running away, stepping up, in the pocket, outside the pocket. He can throw in the short game. He's accurate in the short game, long game, and medium range game. All of that is why, Patrick Mahomes is the best. Josh Allen doesn't have any of that when it comes to arm talent. All he has is arm strength and athleticism. And yes, he's an uber athletic quarterback. He's fantastic. He can run around, he can extend plays, and he's fun to watch. And that gets you far. That can get you wins. What it got Buffalo last year was 10 wins. You can win 10 games with Josh Allen. I just think that's his ceiling. And yes, I think that the Bills could win the division, and especially before the Cam Newton signing to New England, I thought the Bills were definitely the favorite to win the division. Some people still have them that. I think New England will win it. Josh Allen has fundamental problems in his game that everyone, I think any, flaw in somebody's game in the NFL could be coached, obviously, but Josh Allen's issue with accuracy is the hardest thing to coach in the league. You either have accuracy or you don't. They can fix Josh Allen's poor mechanics. They can fix some bad tendencies that Josh Allen has to throw balls that are, not ideal, or, a turnover problem maybe, a fumbling problem, sliding instead of getting hit too much. Those things are easily coached, and, those bad habits will get worked out through time. But being accurate with the ball and throwing guys open, you either have it or you don't. And if you don't have it in the National Football League, you're not an MVP candidate. You're not a Super Bowl winning quarterback. You might get to a Super Bowl, a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo did, but even Jimmy Garoppolo throws guys open and is super accurate. Josh Allen is below Jimmy Garoppolo in my opinion. He's below Dak Prescott in my opinion. He's like on the same level as like a Ryan Tannehill, an athletic guy that isn't super accurate, but even for maybe one game I would consider taking Ryan Tannehill. And I understand some Bills fans are going to be, why are you slandering Josh Allen? I want to give you some statistics. So let's just look at Josh Allen through his entire career. So Josh Allen for a career, the past 2 seasons, has over 5,000 yards. Not a ton of yardage for 2 years now. 2 years. To put in that perspective, Patrick Mahomes throws that in 1 year. In 1 year that Patrick Mahomes throws it, throws for yardage, it takes Josh Allen 2 seasons. Josh Allen has 30 touchdowns in 2 seasons. That's not terrible. especially when you're a rookie and then your second year. He had 21 interceptions, 30-21. Not good at all. He had 12 interceptions his rookie year. He had more interceptions than touchdowns his rookie year. 10 touchdowns, 12 picks his rookie year. And last year had 20 touchdowns and almost 10 interceptions, which is decent, which was definitely better. A quarterback rating is for a career of 78.2 average, but this is where it gets me on Josh Allen. Josh Allen's career completion percentage is 56.3. 56.3. So barely above 50% of the time does he complete a pass. That is not good, folks. That is not good. We harp on Cam Newton all the time for, Cam Newton isn't accurate, or, he's not good enough, and that's why it's not going to work with New England and everything like that. Cam Newton has a way higher completion percentage than Josh Allen does, but yet Josh Allen is an MVP candidate apparently, and is going to take the Bills to the promised land. Last year you saw what the best of Josh Allen could do. Again, Josh Allen has all the arm strength in the world, which should, in theory, translate to yardage, when in reality he barely got above 3,000 yards last season. If Josh Allen is so good, why is Buffalo a running offense? Why do they take the ball out of Josh Allen's hands? Sean McDermott is a great coach, and in fact, I think the Bills are a really, really good team. I think the Bills can do everything. They have a fantastic defense. They have a fantastic wide receiving core. They have a fantastic offensive line. They're getting him weapons like Stephon Diggs. I think Devin Singletary is a fantastic running back. The Bills are the blueprint for what to do with a young quarterback when he's on a cheap contract. Get him weapons, get him an offensive line, get him a running back, get him a defense, great head coach, pretty easy division now that Tom Brady is gone. The Bills are great. They're not great because of Josh Allen. Josh Allen is holding them back. If you took if Russell Wilson had the Josh Allen's roster in Buffalo, the Bills would be winning Super Bowls. And I'm not comparing Josh Allen to, Russell Wilson, obviously, but even if you take some other guys on that level, Jimmy Garoppolo on this Buffalo roster does better than Josh Allen does on this Buffalo roster. So does Dak Prescott, by the way. Dak Prescott would do more with this roster than Josh Allen does. He's holding them back. And the biggest stat is what I saw this morning, which is why I have zero faith in Josh Allen. I do not think he's an MVP candidate. So there's a stat out there called uncatchable pass rate. So when you throw the ball, what is the percentage chance that it's uncatchable? There's no chance the receiver can get even a fingertip on it. Josh Allen led the league in that by a mile. His uncatchable pass rate when throwing a ball, again, the percentage that a ball is uncatchable when he throws it, there is a 27% chance every time Josh Allen throws the ball. Not that it's a bad throw, not that it's underthrown, not that it's underthrown barely, the receiver could have got there, that this ball is absolutely uncatchable. There's no way a guy like John Brown, one of the fastest receivers in the league, can catch up to it or anything like that. Josh Allen, 27% of the time threw an uncatchable pass when he threw it. That is atrocious. This guy is not an MVP candidate. You cannot, 27% of the time, you cannot throw an uncatchable football and expect to win a Super Bowl. Expect to be an NFL MVP. On top of only having a 56% completion percentage and 21 touchdowns, or 21 interceptions and only 30 picks. A QBR of 78.2 and only 5,000 yards in 2 seasons. None about Josh Allen's game is a complete net positive analytically or even when you watch him on the field. The only thing Josh Allen has consistently going for him is his athleticism and how good his roster and talent is around him. Again, take Josh Allen out of the Buffalo Bills system and put in a different quarterback. It's a completely different story. 100%. There's teams there are quarterbacks in this league who would win 12, 13, 14 games with the Buffalo Bills right now. And it's not just the elites like Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Russell Wilson, guys like Jared Goff, guys like Jimmy Garoppolo, guys like Dak Prescott, guys like Carson Wentz would all do so much better in this offense and this system than Josh Allen is. So I don't understand how he is, 4th in MVP odds and the 7th player listed. He's ahead of guys who are way more deserving of being in the MVP conversation. Josh Allen is ahead of guys like Aaron Rodgers, Carson Wentz, Deshaun Watson, Drew Brees, even Baker Mayfield. He's ahead of guys like Drew Lock, Jimmy Garoppolo, Kirk Cousins. All of these players is who Josh Allen is ahead of. So I'll list quickly the players that just Josh Allen are ahead is ahead of Josh Allen. Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Dak Prescott, Kyler Murray, Russell Wilson, Tom Brady. Those are the only people that are listed higher MVP odds than Josh Allen, the Bills quarterback, who 27% of the time throws an uncatchable ball. Again, ahead of guys like Aaron Rodgers, Cam Newton, Carson Wentz, Deshaun Watson, Drew Brees, Baker Mayfield, Ben Roethlisberger, Drew Lock, Matt Ryan, Jimmy Garoppolo, Jared Goff, Kirk Cousins, Matt Stafford. all of those quarterbacks that I just listed who are below Josh Allen would do better in this Buffalo offense, and Buffalo would win more games. Buffalo would win more games with Aaron Rodgers, win more games with Cam Newton, win more games with Carson Wentz, win more games with Deshaun Watson, Drew Brees, Baker Mayfield, Ben Roethlisberger, Drew Lock, Matt Ryan, Jimmy Garoppolo, Jared Goff, Kirk Cousins, Matt Stafford. I mean, come on. It is not, I don't understand this hype surrounding Josh Allen. Again, I think he's holding the Buffalo Bills back. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. And again, we're going to take a quick short break here. I know I said I was going to talk about Bradley Beal and some of the teams he could go to. I'm going to hold that off for a different episode. We're running a little bit out of time here, so I'm going to go for my next segment. I'm going to be talking about Kyler Murray and why I think he actually does deserve to be high in those MVP rankings. So we'll continue that conversation after this short break. And don't forget, at the end of the episode, I am still going to be giving you my top 10 NFL wide receivers. The only thing I'm changing about this episode is no more Bradley Beal talk. We're just going to continue this conversation, and I want to talk about Kyler Murray because I'm fascinated about these MVP odds. So we'll get into Kyler Murray and why he's a legitimate MVP candidate after this break.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Thank you so much for listening through today's episode. I just finished talking about why Josh Allen is actually holding back the Bills and shouldn't be a high MVP candidate as he is. I don't think he's going to make that jump. I know I said I was going to talk about Bradley Beal, but I actually want to make a transition to continue talking about these MVP odds and a different quarterback who is up there, who I believe should be up there, and that's Kyler Murray. Now, I briefly talked about Kyler Murray in my last episode when I said that I think he could have a big season, but I focused more on Drew Lock. Again, I think there are two quarterbacks, and I'll talk about them both here, who I believe actually have a chance of being a pop guy in the NFL, guys who go from their first to second year and become MVP candidates. What Carson Wentz did, what Patrick Mahomes did, and what Lamar Jackson did last season. So while Josh Allen is up here on this list, I don't think he has a legitimate chance at it. I want to talk about two other quarterbacks who I believe do. One of them is high up on the list, and that's Kyler Murray, who I'll get into in a second, and Drew Lock, who's lower on the list. But let's start with Kyler Murray. Now, Kyler Murray, this is not a hot take or anything. A lot of people believe that Kyler Murray is that pop guy who's going to make that big jump. He is tied for third in MVP odds with a couple of other players. I'll list them right now. So Kyler Murray is tied at plus 1.2 with Dak Prescott, Russell Wilson, and Tom Brady. And while he's not as good as Russell Wilson and Tom Brady, and Dak Prescott's just up there because he's the Cowboys quarterback, Kyler Murray has a legitimate shot at being the most valuable player in this league because of how well the Cardinals have done to surround him with talent. Now, if you remember, it's kind of crazy to think about now that how out of this world the Cardinals were when they selected Kyler Murray, because if you remember, they had Josh Rosen, who they had just drafted, and in my opinion actually showed some flashes in Arizona of how he could be a good quarterback. They were just the worst team in the league. Worst offensive line. Their coach was fired after that season. Terrible defense. Terrible everything. And Josh Rosen was supposed to be the future. They hired Cliff Kingsbury, who in my opinion is still an unproven commodity. I know a lot of people are on the Cliff Kingsbury trade. He had a losing record in college with Patrick Mahomes as his quarterback, so I am not completely sold on Cliff Kingsbury. I think he is a good offensive mind, maybe even a great offensive mind. And I think he had a good season last year with Arizona, and he did better than I thought. I would have not have been surprised at all if Arizona was just like the year before, picking in the top three. He actually had them picking, I think, at, 8, where they got, what's his name? Isaiah Simmons, who's an insane player, a lot like Derwin James, hybrid. So the Cardinals are doing good. I'm still not proven on Cliff Kingsbury, but if you remember, they got rid of Josh Rosen, brought in Kyler Murray because Cliff had this infatuation with Kyler ever since high school. How Kyler Murray, interesting stat about him is that he was he is actually maybe even the greatest high school quarterback in Texas football history, which is no slouch. Like, that is a major, major accomplishment. Texas high school football is arguably the hardest, biggest, toughest high school football in the entire league, up there with California, Southern Florida, where else? Maybe even New York you could maybe put up there. But Texas, for the most part, is considered like the best high school football in the country. Kyler Murray went like undefeated in all 4 years starting from freshman to senior, won 4 national championships, like crazy, crazy stuff. Kyler Murray had. And Cliff Kingsbury was obviously the head coach at Texas Tech and wanted to bring Kyler Murray in after Patrick Mahomes, I think, a little bit. Patrick Mahomes is obviously at Texas Tech as well. But again, Cliff Kingsbury had a losing record there, which is why I'm a little bit more skeptical. But getting back to Kyler Murray is a really interesting prospect because if the guys who... He's kind of benefited from guys who come before him because, again, he is short. And while we always say, oh my god, he's a short quarterback, he's only like Baker Mayfield's so short, he's only 6 feet. Drew Brees, he's so short, only 6 feet. Russell Wilson, 5'11", so short. There was legitimate reports that Kyler Murray was like 5'9.5", which is like genuinely short for the NFL. And a lot of people are skeptical about it. I am not one of them because I believe in shorter quarterbacks. I saw what Drew Brees did. I saw what Russell Wilson does, one of my favorite quarterbacks in the league. I even liked Baker Mayfield coming out of college more than others. I'm a little bit less high on him now, but out of college I was really high on Baker Mayfield. I loved Tua Tagovailoa coming out of this draft, even though he was shorter. So again, I don't use height as really of a measuring thing for quarterbacks, but Kyler Murray's like genuinely short, and he's also really skinny. When you look at some of these other quarterbacks who are shorter, Drew Brees, Russell Wilson in particular, and Tua Tagovailoa, they are more stocky, they're more built in the legs. And they are more built like almost like running backs, if that makes any sense. Kyler Murray is really skinny. But again, Kyler Murray showed out last season, won Offensive Rookie of the Year. There's an argument of whether he deserved it or not. Josh Jacobs had a fantastic season for the Oakland Raiders at the time, now the Las Vegas Raiders. But Kyler Murray last season, again, 3,722 yards, 20 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, 64.4 completion percentage, and a quarterback rating of 87.4. Really good stuff. And I also have a stat, according to Pro Football Focus, between 4 and 6 interceptions that Kyler Murray threw last season were considered not his fault. Whether it was like a tipped ball or something like that, I'm not really sure. But between 4 and 6, so he really threw about 8 interceptions with those 20 touchdowns. Great stuff from him, and he was electric for the Arizona Cardinals. He made the Cardinals must-watch television. Now, he's coming into year 2 now, in the second year of the Cliff Kingsbury system, and I do believe Cliff Kingsbury's, at least from an offensive standpoint, it does work. Kyler Murray, the system that Cliff Kingsbury likes to run is 5 wide, get as many wide receivers and tight ends out there, 1 running back who's more of a receiving back, and Kyler Murray plays point guard. He's a distributor of the ball. He finds the open guy, and he gets them there, and Kyler Murray's really, really good at that, man. He finds the open guy pretty consistently. He's quick with his reads. He's got really good footwork. And the only thing that I think is a little bit overstated about Kyler Murray is how good he is as a dual threat. Because yes, Kyler Murray can run around, and he totally made plays last year on his feet with the Arizona Cardinals. There were a lot of plays where if somebody gets a hand on him, he's going down. He did not get hurt last year. He slid a lot. Good stuff from him if he's considered a running quarterback. The thing that, really amazes me about Kyler Murray the most, and why I think he actually has the chance of being the MVP, is not only his eyes, which I believe is some of the best in the NFL. Again, the reason why he works so well in Cliff Kingsbury's system, and why, actually, I shouldn't say that. Cliff Kingsbury's system doesn't benefit Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray really benefits Cliff Kingsbury's system. So, again, like when I think Josh Allen is holding back the Buffalo Bills and their offensive system and what they want to do, without Kyler Murray, I don't think Cliff Kingsbury's system looks as good and looks as successful as it is now in the National Football League because of how good Kyler Murray is. Kyler Murray has an NFL term that's called quick twitch muscle, which is pretty much, those quick reads. It's less about thinking and more about instincts and predictability and getting guys open and things like that. Kyler Murray throws with insanely good touch, and has an insanely twitchy eyes. He knows where the play is supposed to go relatively quickly, like within a second. He knows where the ball is supposed to go and he delivers it. Also, on a side note, one of the most fascinating things I find about Kyler Murray is how fast he throws the ball. Now, he is a baseball player. He also almost went to the MLB to play for the Oakland Athletics, and he throws the ball like a shortstop. He whips the ball. The amount of velocity Kyler Murray gets off the ball, even though he has smaller hands, a smaller frame, a skinnier guy, a shorter dude, he really lasers the ball in there. Kyler Murray is really good at throwing into tight windows because of that. He also knows when to lay off the gas and throw some balls with touch and with ease. And I think Kyler Murray could be really good. Again, Cliff Kingsbury system year 2, more weapons. DeAndre Hopkins in this year. Kenyon Drake gets another full offseason in this system. The defense got better. They got a guy with Isaiah Simmons who might be the steal of the draft. He fell really far. He's an uber athletic hybrid linebacker slash safety slash defensive end, if you want to call him that. He's more of a pass rushing linebacker. He's in this new wave of positionless defense that guys like Derwin James come to mind. Jamal Adams a little bit. More Derwin James though. And Isaiah Simmons could be really good for that system. The only thing that's holding Kyler Murray back of a real MVP campaign this year is how hard his division is. San Francisco is a really tough team to beat, and while I do believe they're going to have a Super Bowl hangover and take a little bit of a dip, I still think they're a playoff team. Again, Russell Wilson, the Seattle Seahawks, especially if they make some moves like Antonio Brown and Jadeveon Clowney, I think are going to win that division and maybe even win the Super Bowl. And who knows if maybe the Rams can bounce back as well. So that division is tough, but again, getting DeAndre Hopkins, you have a wide receiver core now. Hopkins, Christian Kirk, Larry Fitzgerald, outstanding stuff there. At running back, you have Kenyon Drake, who's kind of really popped off and being one of the best receiving backs in the league. And if that defense can just step it up a little bit, then the Cardinals could have a legitimate powerhouse of an offense, and Kyler Murray could have a big statistical jump. Wouldn't surprise me at all if Kyler Murray got to mid-30s in touchdowns, 33 to 35, and kept those interceptions between 10 and 13, and could be in the MVP conversation. Again, he is a high favorite for the pop guy in the National Football League this year, and I would agree with it. Kyler Murray is a really awesome player to watch, really awesome guy to watch when you look at his eyes, again, his footwork, the way he throws the ball, man. Just go watch some Kyler Murray highlights. He throws it like a baseball player. It is so cool to watch how much velocity he actually gets and how much spin. Like, the ball spins so much when he throws the ball. It's so fascinating to see. The other pop guy that I talked about a little bit in my last episode is Drew Lock, the Denver Broncos quarterback. Drew Lock is really low on this list. He's all the way down below guys who I think he has a chance. He's below guys like Big Ben, Baker Mayfield at a plus 3.3. Again, I think he could be really good. You know, Drew Lock was the first out of many guys that everyone was like, oh my God, Patrick Mahomes is so good. We need to find the next Patrick Mahomes. And Drew Lock was the first guy that people kind of pegged as, you know, in that criteria of, well, the Denver Broncos are getting Drew Lock because they think he could be the next Patrick Mahomes, if that makes sense. Jordan Love, who just got drafted by the Green Bay Packers, also fits into this category as well as a guy who was drafted with the hopes of becoming the next Patrick Mahomes. And that's because of their big arm strength, their really good arm talent. Drew Lock has really good arm talent, again, which is throwing off of different platforms, arm angles, things like that. And Drew Lock also throws with like this elastic-like arm that Jordan Love does. And Patrick Mahomes is really perfected, and why a lot of people believe he could be the pop guy. Also, I mentioned how the Buffalo Bills are a really good example of what you should do to build around a young quarterback when they have a rookie contract. If anyone's doing it better than Buffalo, or Kansas City, what Kansas City did with Patrick Mahomes obviously was immaculate, and what, you know, Baltimore's doing with, you know, Lamar Jackson before they have to pay him. The Denver Broncos have been quietly building a monster roster. Now, their defense is already good. Vic Fangio is a defensive head coach, one of the best defensive head coaches in the league, or when he was a defensive coordinator at least. He's still an unproven head coach commodity. But guys like Von Miller, Simmons, Bradley Chubb, he's going to come back next year. Really a ton of talent on the defensive end for the Denver Broncos. They've always had a good defense, always been a defensive first type team. Now let's go to the offense. Now, Peyton Manning, when he was in Denver, didn't have necessarily a dynamic offense, but a lot of good players. This Broncos offense could legitimately be dynamic. I'm talking a ton of speed. What Patrick Mahomes, or what the Chiefs did with Patrick Mahomes when they brought him in, was surround him with speed everywhere. Everywhere. You know, Tyreek Hill, Nikhil Hartman, you know, Sammy Watkins lost some weight and became really fast as well. Travis Kelce's one of the faster tight ends in the league. Look what the Denver Broncos are doing. Cortland Sutton was a receiver last year and the best one of the Broncos last year, one of the fastest in the league. They drafted Jerry Jeudy, who's an all-purpose route runner. He's super fast. His pro comparison for me was Odell Beckham Jr. I think he is maybe the best route runner I have ever seen coming out of college. If you want to watch some crazy highlights, look up Jerry Jeudy route running. He puts his foot in the ground like nobody else, and he pivots and he stops on a dime. He's going to be an incredible player. He was my number one wide receiver going into the draft, even though Henry Ruggs went ahead of him. I would have taken Jerry Jeudy. And then I think in the second or the third round, they also drafted KJ Hamler, who a lot of people is a boom or bust type player. He is a home run hitter. He is a speed demon, deep threat. Take a 5-yard check down becomes a 40-yard touchdown with guys like him. Guys like Hartman on the Chiefs, Tyreek Hill do those types of plays as well. He's also on the team. And Noah Fant is a really fast and a Pro Bowl level tight end going into his second or maybe even third year. Oh no, second year. I think he was a rookie last year. He showed a lot of flashes of potential to be an all-pro tight end one day. So what the Broncos have done now is kind of copied the Chiefs and maybe even a little bit better if it works out for them at the end. Not to mention they also have two good running backs, Phillip Lindsay, who's an outstanding receiving back, more of a speed back, and Melvin Gordon, who's a straight-up power back, workhorse back. So now, the Denver Broncos have two good running backs, I think two, maybe even three good receivers, a good tight end, a great defense, and a really, a developing offensive line. A good head coach, I think, in Vic Fangio. I think people are sleeping on Drew Lock to be the pop guy. Again, I understand. I just talked about Kyler Murray and why there's a good chance he is the pop guy, and I would totally bet money on Kyler Murray doing it. But a dark horse pop candidate for a guy who can go from year 1 to year 2 and be an MVP candidate is Drew Lock. Again, similar to Kyler Murray, the only thing holding Drew back from popping like immediately, one is lack of game experience. Kyler Murray played the entire season last year. Drew Lock only played, I think, 5 or 6 games last year. Also, that division is tough, man. You have Kansas City, which is the best team in the league, maybe. They just came off a Super Bowl. I think the Chargers are a really good roster. I think they have a Super Bowl caliber roster, depending how good their quarterbacks could be. I don't think they'll win a Super Bowl, obviously, because I don't trust, their coaching or Tyrod Taylor or Justin Herbert. And then obviously you have the Las Vegas Raiders, who I think are a wild card team. I feel like they're either going to be really good or really bad in the middle there. They'll probably end up being somewhere in a mediocre range. I don't like Derek Carr, but I like John Gruden and Mike Mayock. So that is a tough division to plan, but I would not be surprised at all if Drew Lock led the Denver Broncos to a 10-11 win season and they made the playoffs and Drew Lock had a fantastic year. Again, 2-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio last year, high QBR in just the few games he played. Drew Lock is a dark horse pop guy for me, but I think Kyler Murray is the favorite. All right, we're going to take one last break, and on the other side of it, I'm going to be giving you guys my top 10 NFL wide receivers in the league. We're going to get into that right after this break.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, and we are back here at the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. To finish up the show quickly, I want to be giving you guys my top 10 NFL wide receivers. Now, in my opinion, this is actually a harder list than I thought it would be. Harder than the list that I made with the quarterbacks, with the coaches, with the trios, everything, because the wide receiver position is so stacked in the NFL that it's really tough to see who is the best and who's better at each other. And you also have to take into consideration their situations, what quarterbacks they're playing with, who else is on their team, what division they're in, who's covering them up, how they do against top competition, things like that. So here's my top 10 NFL wide receiver list. Let's get into it with an honorable mention, and that's Chris Godwin of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He did not make this list, but he is the last cut, you could say. I think he's a really good wide receiver. I think he'll thrive in under Tom Brady. I think his stats might take a little bit of a hit because Tom Brady doesn't like to throw the ball downfield as much. But, we'll see what happens with him. I just think he's a really good wide receiver, but I don't think he's the best on his team, which is one of the reasons why he's not in this top 10 list. So let's get into it. At number 10, I have Keenan Allen of the Los Angeles Chargers, who I think is one of the most underrated wide receivers in the league. I think he would be a lot better than he is if he had some better quarterback play. Phillip Rivers has been on the decline recently. He's obviously out now. How will Tyrod Taylor / Justin Herbert do with him? He's a receptions machine. I think he's one of the best slot guys in the league as well. I have him at number 10. I think Keenan Allen is really underrated, really good wide receiver. I think he could have a big year if, maybe Justin Herbert and him find a good connection, or even Tyrod Taylor and him find a good connection as well. So number 10, Keenan Allen. And number 9, I have the $100 million man, Amari Cooper, which might seem a little bit low for him. But the thing with Amari Cooper is I think he's a really good wide receiver, and I think he elevates Dak Prescott. I don't think Dak Prescott elevates him. I've talked about that many a times on this show. But in my opinion, he doesn't show up enough against top competition and against, on the road, those big road games. Those things like that, those are tough. Those are tough on Amari Cooper. And I understand that a lot of people will point to the New England Patriots game, when he faced Stephon Gilmore. I'm not even talking about that one because Stephon Gilmore is the best cornerback in the league, shutdown wise. He's incredible. Maybe one of the best corners of our generation. And he's also playing against the New England secondary. I'm talking about those road games in Philadelphia, where he doesn't completely, tear it up like he does on those home games against the Redskins. He needs to step it up in bigger competition, and I need to see him in the playoffs. We haven't gotten to see that yet with him in Dak. I need to see him step up in the big games, in the playoffs, in those big moments, those road games in Philly, even those road games for other teams as well, in the cold, late at night. Let's go, step it up in the big moment. I need more of that from Amari Cooper. So that's why he's coming in at number 9. I still think he's a fantastic wide receiver, though. At number 8, I have Miami Dolphins wide receiver Devontae Parker, who was one of the best wide receivers last year, and he was actually, according to PFF, the best wide receiver when it comes to jump balls, 50-50 balls. The reason why I have him above a guy like Amari Cooper or Keenan Allen is because I think Devontae Parker is going to continue to develop and do really well. You also have to take in consideration he was working with Ryan Fitzpatrick and Josh Rosen last year and still put up all of those numbers. Ton of receptions, ton of touchdowns. Best receiver on that Dolphins team. Best offensive player on that Dolphins team that really overperformed. I have him at number 8 and cracking into the top 10 finally. He's kind of a late bloomer, but again, I think he'll have continuous success, especially with Tua Tagovailoa as the quarterback. Number 8, Devontae Parker, arguably the best jump ball receiver in the league. At number 7, I have Odell Beckham Jr., who has never really been what he was supposed to be after those big seasons with the New York Giants. I do think he'll have a rebound season. I think him and Baker need to get on the same page. I've talked about this before where I don't think Odell Beckham and Baker Mayfield are a great match. Similar to Kyler Murray, Baker Mayfield likes to spread the ball around and be more of a point guard and find the open man and just to be a distributor. I think Odell Beckham is a guy that commands a lot of targets, and you have to kind of force the ball to him and scheme him open, which isn't a great fit for Baker Mayfield. But again, Kevin Stefanski has always loved Odell. He wanted him in Minnesota when he was getting traded from New York. I think he'll have a big season. I think he's going to have a bounce back season. I think the Browns as a whole are going to have a bounce back season. I like Kevin Stefanski a lot. So at number 7, I have Odell Beckham Jr. At number 6, I have Green Bay Packer wide receiver Devontae Adams, who I think is really good. Chad Ochocinco said he's the best route runner in the league, and that is his biggest strength, is route running and getting open. You don't have to scheme him open like some other guys. The reason why he's maybe not as higher as some other people is because I think Aaron Rodgers makes him probably look a little bit better than he does, and that's no shot at Devontae Adams. A ton of wide receivers look better than they are because of quarterback. It's just how it is. I'll get into some more in a minute. But I think there's just a couple more wide receivers that are better than Devontae Adams at some other things. But again, Devontae Adams is fantastic. Comes in at number 6 on my list. Him and Aaron Rodgers are one of the best quarterback wide receiver duos. At number 5, I have Mike Evans of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who I think is going to have the best year of his career, in my opinion, with Tom Brady. Tom Brady's going to love this guy. He has an insane catch radius. Reminds me a lot of how Randy Moss used to be with the New England Patriots. I'm not saying Mike Evans is Randy Moss, but the similar play style will be really good for Tom. A lot of jump balls for him. He can run every route in the route tree. He's a big target, one of the best catch radiuses in the league. And catch radius is, who has the biggest kind of wingspan area around where the ball is still catchable for them. Tom Brady's going to love playing with him. It's going to be fantastic to see. I think he'll have a big year. Mike Evans at number 5. I think he's a little bit underrated because of the quarterbacks he's been playing with recently. But now that he's got Tom Brady, it's going to be a big year for Mike Evans coming in at number 5 on this list. At number 4, I have Mike Thomas from the New Orleans Saints, who leads all the leagues in receptions, yards. He's fantastic. The reason why he's not higher than other people, he's not a touchdown guy, not a deep threat guy. He runs a lot of slants, sort of outs. A lot of short routage thing. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. Still one of the best receivers in the league, coming in at number 4. But I think some other guys, the top 3 of him ahead of him, just make more impact plays to impact winning, touchdowns, playmakers. I don't think Mike Thomas is that big of a playmaker in comparison to these next 3 I'm going to talk about. Number 3, Tyreek Hill, fastest receiver in the league. And he's really changed the game at the wide receiver position. Speed guys never used to be the number 1 receiver on a team. Now everyone's trying to find the next Tyreek Hill and Patrick Mahomes combination. Henry Ruggs was drafted first. The first wide receiver off the board for a reason, and that is because of, how good Tyreek Hill is. They want him to be something similar to that. So Tyreek Hill has really changed the game at the wide receiver position. He is the fastest. He's a track athlete. Again, him and Patrick Mahomes are fantastic. I don't know if Tyreek Hill would have those numbers if it wasn't for Patrick Mahomes, but again, he is a top 3 receiver in the league and maybe the biggest playmaker in the league. At number 2, DeAndre Hopkins of the Arizona Cardinals. All this man does is catch footballs. He does not drop anything. One of the best wide receivers in the league. Constantly open. Great route runner. Going to be fantastic to see. A huge shot to Deshaun Watson that they decided to move on from him. And a huge upgrade to Kyler Murray. Again, the Cardinals got him for relatively on the cheap and pretty much nothing. He is going to be a fantastic weapon for Kyler Murray to use. And with Kyler Murray's play style of distributing, and there's a lot of good wide receivers on that team, it's going to free up a lot of things for Arizona. And Nuke Hopkins is going to have a big year. DeAndre Hopkins coming in at number 2. He's now the new Arizona Cardinal wide receiver number 1. And finally at number 1, the best receiver in the league in my opinion is still Julio Jones. This man is incredible. All he does is dominate corners, dominate the league, and is one of the few bright spots on this Atlanta Falcons offense now ever since that Super Bowl. Again, he had that one year where he doesn't get a lot of touchdowns. Again, all this man does is get doubled and tripled every year, year in, year out, and all he does is still get over 1,000 yards, still get 5+ touchdowns, still never drop a pass, all of these things. Julio Jones is still the best wide receiver, in my opinion, and deserves to be the highest paid one. I don't think he is right now, but I think he deserves that. One of the few consistent bright spots with the Atlanta Falcons ever since that Super Bowl. Number 1, Julio Jones. That is my top 10 NFL wide receiver list. Again, that was a really tough list to make. Harder than the coaches, harder than the quarterbacks. But yeah, that's going to do it for today's episode of the GSMC Sports Podcast. Again, thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. Comment and down below, follow us all on all of our social media platforms and leave us a 5-star review as well. We love to interact with you guys anywhere on social media, in the comments, all that good stuff. Again, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a 5-star review. Again, thank you so much for listening to today's episode, and I will catch you all in the next one.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.